So in April of 2024, I made the right decision to go no contact with a family member who mocked my dead father's grave during a phone call. Now, I may sound calm and measured as I tell this story, but it doesn't make it any less serious or painful. The truth is, I have processed a lot in therapy, and that's why I have the voice and the ability to talk about this now. For the sake of this story, I will be referring to this family member as Mary, easy to say and remember. Prior to April 2024, I was already very low contact with Mary because Mary has a long history of doing and saying extremely harmful things, not just to me, but to my dad and several of his family members as well. However, I had to get back in contact with Mary when I needed to sell an asset that was in Mary's name. Now, this asset had been in my possession since 2016, and even before my father died, the asset had been in the family. However, when I began to make the decision to cut Mary out of my life, I realized that it was time for me to hand over any asset that was in her name so that I could be truly free. So in December of 2023, I let Mary know that I wanted to sell the asset, but I needed her consent, and she gave me her consent via a text message. I found a buyer in January 2024, but the buyer needed a signed document showing that Mary had indeed given consent. So I had to reach out to Mary and I let her know the situation. And Mary, unsurprisingly, decided that she wanted the asset for herself. Mary then offered to match the buyer's price. And of course, since the asset is in her name, I didn't argue. I said, no problem. She asked me when I'll be ready to sell, and I said I'll be ready to sell at the end of March 2024. She said she would have the money ready then. The end of March rolls around, I don't hear from Mary, so I place a call. Mind you, between when we agreed on the price and when I placed that call, I hadn't said a word to Mary because remember, I was very low contact. When I placed that call on the 31st, Mary explains the reason for the delay and tells me that in a couple of days, the money will be ready. I call again on April 3rd to follow up, and I respectfully let Mary know that I did have a buyer who was ready, and if she wasn't ready, I could go back to that buyer and see if they would still be interested. What was supposed to be a simple and straightforward conversation ended up being one where Mary mocked, insulted me, and then proceeded to mock my dead father's grave. At first, Mary's focus was just on verbally abusing me, but at that point again, I had already really done a lot of emotional detachment, and so I wasn't really moved by the insult. I just cared more about knowing when the money was going to hit my account. I guess when Mary realized that her words were not doing what they were supposed to do, she brought my dead father into the conversation. She then started to mock my dead father's grave, and I immediately spoke up, and I said these exact words: "Keep my father's name out of your fucking mouth." Mary continued to insult my father and mock his grave, and I continued to say these words: "Keep my father's name out of your fucking mouth." At one point, I started to shout and say, "Is this who you are? You are the kind of person that mocks a dead man's grave, that uses a dead man's grave to insult and belittle his daughter." To which she replied, and I quote, "Yes, this is exactly who I am. Who are you for me not to mock you?" At that point, I realized that very low contact was not an option any longer, and I had to completely cut this person out of my life. After the phone call ended, I blocked her number and blocked her on everything, communication channel-wise. The next day, Mary sent the money for the asset, and I dropped it off for her. A few months after April, I sent an email to my paternal extended family, my dad's siblings, and I informed them that Mary was no longer in my life and I would have nothing to do with her because prior to that conversation, my father's side of the family had been sort of using me as a middleman to communicate between both sides. After I sent that email, I then found out from several of my dad's family members that Mary had also insulted my father at his funeral and also insulted them and his entire family. It took my extended family members 7 years to tell me that Mary acted that way at my father's funeral. So the combination of her mocking my father during that call and finding out that she had also insulted him at his funeral and also dissed my aunties and uncles, that was enough for me. Now, since April of 2024 and as recent as 2 weeks ago, Mary has been working aggressively to re-enter my life and regain some kind of control over me. Mary has used everyone from strangers, other family members, and even my father's friends. My response to them has been consistent. This woman did a lot of horrible things to your friend, to me, his daughter. I will not be reconciling or letting this person back into my life. And going forward, I have decided that I'm going to make those people extremely uncomfortable every time they attempt to pressure me to reconcile with Mary. I will begin to share explicit details of the sadistic and evil things that Mary did to my father while he was alive, while he was sick, and after his death. I also made the right decision to cut off the very people who encouraged Mary to humiliate and insult my father when he was alive and after his death. I heard many phone calls between Mary and some of her female friends where she would mock my father and they would be laughing with her. I also cut off some of her own family members who joined her in insulting and humiliating my father, and there are just no plans to ever let them back in. I will say more about the awful things Mary did to my father in a memoir that I'm working on about his life and his tragic death.